Well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Joni Parsons, co-creator of Revel 11, along with Monica Smith.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
We're so happy you're here today. Monica and I started Revel 11 about 5 years ago and pivoted online last year. Since then, we've had more than 300 curated events, and we now have a global platform for women, which is so exciting. We also hold events and retreats here in Seattle, in the Puget Sound area, and across the globe. Thank you so much for joining us. We are honored to partner with Leisure Care on a very important conversation around aging well. We've had a whole series this week, and this is our 4th event today, which is probably the most important. Women and money is what we're discussing today. No matter your age or your situation, it is so important to plan ahead for your financial well-being and estate planning. I can't say that enough. It is so important to plan ahead. I'm so thrilled to introduce my good friend, Tama Smith, head of Women Living a Richer Life at Brighton Jones. And don't you just love that title? Head of Women Living a Richer Life. Tama, I'm so glad that you're here today along with your team, and we're so thrilled to hear the information that you're sharing about women and money. Welcome.
Thank you, Joni, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen who may have joined as well. As Joni mentioned, I am Tama Smith, and I have the pleasure of leading Women Living a Richer Life at Brighton Jones, and we'll get into a little bit of that in a moment. But you have joined our discussion today on financial wisdom and understanding the importance of financial and estate planning. Joining me are two of my, I call them my Women Living a Richer Life Wonder Women, two of my colleagues on the East Coast, one of our incredible lead advisors, Jessica Ray, who is a certified financial planner and works in our Washington, DC area office, and Tyra Lynn, cast person, who just got married. So I'm getting used to Tyra Lynn Reinhardt. Tyra Lynn is an estate planning attorney and one of our fantastic estate planning advisors here in our Seattle headquarter office. So what are we discussing? Well, before I jump into our agenda, I'd like to just share a little bit about who we are. As Brighton Jones. We are a nationally known wealth management firm. We're growing. We have offices across the country. We work with thousands of households, and we enjoy the fact that we have such a high retention rate of 98% with our clients. So in essence, wherever you are across the country, we're nearby to be able to help. Our agenda for today, I'd like to first cover, financial wisdom, why it's important. We as women are the new face of wealth, and so as the head of Women Living a Richer Life, I want to share a few stats around that. And then Jessica will walk us through financial well-being. What is it? And why having a financial well-being team, why that's so important. And then Jessica and Tyra Lynn will talk through what financial and estate planning looks like at various life stages. And then I'll come in at the end to do a brief recap and to take any questions that you might have. So throughout this conversation, please feel free to enter any questions in the chat. We'll cover the majority at the end, but I might pop a few in throughout our discussion. So, women as the new face of wealth. What does this mean? Well, I would say traditionally and historically, 2/3 of our wealth in this country have been controlled by men. And by 2030, the pendulum is swinging and 2/3 of our country's wealth will be controlled by women. And so there's this huge opportunity for all of us as women to be ready to step into this massive responsibility and accountability. Why are we so concerned about this? Well, we created Women Living a Richer Life because we saw a readiness gap. While there's a huge opportunity in controlling 2/3 of our country's wealth over the next 8 to 9 years, reaching that point, it's important because 95% of us at some point in our lives will need to be the primary financial decision maker in our household. And even though that's a huge reality where most of us will need to play that role, right now, 81% of us as women don't feel financially confident. And 1 out of 2 women in partnerships defer financial decisions to their spouses. Financial, meaning long-term financial decisions versus financial decisions around budgeting and managing the checkbook. So given this amazing opportunity and this readiness gap that we saw, at Brighton Jones, we created Women Living a Richer Life to do our part in helping to close this readiness gap. And conversations such as the one today that we're having right now around financial wisdom is one of the many solutions and steps that we're taking to help women around the country begin to enhance our financial confidence and to become more financially empowered and financially wise. So what I would like Jessica to do is to come in and talk about financial wisdom. Is all about being, having financial wellness and financial well-being. And I'd like Jessica to talk about what financial well-being is. Jessica?
Thanks, Tama. So as Tama just mentioned, part of today's conversation is really about helping you all navigate your own path to financial well-being. And we really emphasize those words, your own path, because no one's path really looks identical to each other. And we'll walk into 3 personas where you might relate to pieces of each person, but you really will be carving your own path to this financial freedom or financial well-being. This triangle is really powerful here because in the past, wealth managers really focused on this bottom row of the triangle, and really particularly these first 3 boxes of money manager selection, asset allocation, and security selection. And what we've learned through time is that your financial picture is so much more than just picking the right mix of stocks or bonds given what your age or risk profile is. Of course, setting an allocation is really important, and it's important to have helpers in setting that right allocation for you. But as you can see in this triangle, there's so much more to financial well-being. For us at Brighton Jones, financial well-being is the alignment of your time, your money, and your other resources with the things that you care about most, your passions and your purpose. Your passions in life are what you love to do, and then your purpose in life is the legacy that you live out day to day and the legacy that you wish to leave behind. That's where a lot of the estate planning comes in that Tyra will talk about today. Just a point at the second tier up from the bottom of the triangle, you'll see the word vocational freedom. Vocational freedom for us traditionally is called retirement, but we call this vocational freedom because it's that point where you no longer have to work to earn a paycheck. You might choose to work or you might choose to pursue a different passion, but the key is that it's a choice. And it's a point in time that's not assigned to an age like 65, but really the nest egg that you've accumulated in your key working years. So on your journey to financial health, we encourage the idea of having this right team in place to help you really reach financial wellness. So you have a team in most aspects of your life. You probably have a health team that includes your doctors, your dentists, your gynecologists, amongst others. And you probably, at some point, if you were working, have a team at work, people you relied on to review your work or help you execute on different goals or tasks that you were assigned to. Many people don't really think about a team in terms of their personal finances, and that's something we've learned at Brighton Jones. It's important that you have a team that includes the right CPA for your taxes, who's talking to the right financial planner for your investments, or that person's talking to the right estate planner for your legacy. The reason this is critical is because you want to make sure you own the right team that's there working for you and together for you. I work with a lot of families and individuals who have started to build this team for themselves. And what I've really seen as a common thread amongst it is this idea of trust. They build these trusting relationships where they have all of these experts working together cohesively towards that common goal of helping that person or persons achieve financial wellness. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be focusing on 3 different personas of women or couples at different stages in their life. So we'll start with Allison, who's really launching her career. We'll move on to Mary, who's established, raising teenagers, and learning about the stress of adding aging parents into the mix. And then we'll end with Jane and Bob, who are ready to retire, travel more, and maybe spend more time with their grandchildren. We know that the journey to financial well-being in general is extremely personal, so you might not identify with every single one of these scenarios. And we'd like to caveat this because the goal isn't for you to feel, oh, this is the person I relate most to. It's really about making sure that you're figuring out the pieces of each of these scenarios that might be most impactful to your life, and give you a super high level understanding of the financial and estate planning topics that we tend to see with the clients in these specific situations. So Tama, let's go ahead and start with Allison. All right, so just to paint the picture for everyone, Allison is in her early 30s and in the early career stage of her life. She's navigating launching her career, and she's also learning more about a reasonable budget and debt management. The word debt can be scary, but it's normal, especially when you're trying to get an understanding of what your budget looks like. Just as a refresher for everyone, a budget maps out your income and expenses and allows you to set savings goals. You'll hear the word goal from us a lot in today's conversation because it's really important to make sure you have these goals to strive towards. And as soon as you have an understanding of what your expenses look like, you can start working toward building different types of goals, like setting an emergency fund, which we'll spend a couple minutes talking about. But really, this emergency fund is about 3 to 6 months of your expenses in a very liquid or easily accessible bucket. And that's really important because we feel that life can happen at any point and you might not know it's happening. So if for example, when COVID-19 hit, some people were laid off from their jobs and they needed to figure out what that next step looked like for them. So having an emergency bucket to carry them through a couple months to figure those types of life scenarios out is essential. And the next piece of this puzzle is understanding and managing your debt. And that's really wrapping your arms around what your payment plans might look like to pay down your debt. For example, if you might choose to leverage a mortgage and take advantage of low interest rates if you have the ability to do so. There's really good debt and bad debt. Things like investing in your education would be considered good debt, while building up credit card debt would be considered bad debt. Sometimes credit cards get a bad rep and are seen as bad debt, but that isn't always the case. In fact, we'd say credit is a great tool to use. We just have to use it wisely. And then for the next piece of someone like Allison is really thinking about that 401k match if you have one. You can theoretically contribute about $20,000 as an employee to a 401k plan, more if you're above a certain age, but most of those people in Allison's shoes that are in their 30s aren't really able to maximize on maxing out that 401k, and that's completely okay. You'll want to contribute enough if you can to capture the full employer match because it's essentially free money, but the goal isn't necessarily to max out that 401k. It's making sure you're creating a good balance between your retirement assets, capturing that match, but then also starting to build up that brokerage account to make sure that you have some liquidity for near-term goals. Maybe that's buying a home or maybe that's getting married. When it comes to 401ks, we often get the question of Roth dollars or pre-tax dollars. You may have heard these terms thrown around, and at a high level, pre-tax 401k really just means you're putting dollars in pre-tax or before taxes. They're going into the account, they grow tax deferred, and then when you do draw those dollars out, you pay income taxes on those draws. When you enter vocational freedom, you essentially are playing this game of tax rate arbitrage. So for a Roth 401k, you're going to put those dollars in after tax and they're going to grow tax free. In vocational freedom, when you pull those dollars out, you don't pay any taxes on it. So when it comes to tax rate arbitrage, if you feel you're in a lower tax bracket today, than you will be in the future, you likely want to consider Roth 401k contributions. If you feel you're in a higher tax bracket today, like if you're in your peak earning years, you may choose to put money in pre-tax and delay those taxes till when you're in retirement, likely at a lower tax bracket. There's no perfect black or white answer when it comes to pre-tax and Roth contributions. Some people don't like to assume that their tax bracket in the future might be less. So another strategy is to do a combination of pre-tax and Roth dollars to build up a balance between both those allocations. And the last bullet point here is insuring for the basics. So going to be completely straightforward with everyone. Insurance is the absolute worst. You pay for something that you hope you never have to use, but the bright side is that it does give you peace of mind when the inevitable, unavoidable life circumstances happen. You definitely don't want to know what it's like to have to file a claim for any of these situations. And we get to sit on the side of the table where we work with a variety of clients that unfortunately do run into these situations. And what we've learned is that it's incredibly important to be adequately prepared. So on the insurance side of things, make sure that you're thinking about having proper liability coverage on your home and auto insurances, seeing what work is offering you from a life insurance perspective, making sure that the disability insurance will cover your lifestyle or your family's lifestyle if something were to happen to you. And then really ask the question of whether any outside work coverage is needed. Usually in people in Allison's shoes, we don't necessarily need outside coverage at this point, but sometimes given what care needs you have, for example, kids, elder parents, etc., there might be a need for that. On the auto insurance side of things, you really just want to make sure you're thinking about things that, things like an umbrella policy where once you have your home and auto corrected and your nest egg continues to grow, you have this umbrella that really accounts for any sort of excess liability incidents that might occur, so you're adequately protected on that piece. And then the next up is really estate planning. So I'll pass it on over to Tara Lynn to touch on some of the estate planning topics that we see people at Allison's stage really finding themselves in.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to be talking about estate planning, which, similar to finances, can be really intimidating and emotional for people. And the goal of my career, my life's work, is really to kind of deconstruct why people feel that way and give them actual action item solutions that can kind of move the ball forward and provide a really good estate planning foundation for whatever stage they find themselves in. So for Allison, as Jess mentioned, she's really early career, so really building wealth, probably has some student loan debt, and might come to me and say, I don't need an estate plan. I have a negative net worth, or I'm hovering right around zero, even though I'm trying to save. I have some debt. And to that, I tell clients, in my opinion, the fewer assets you have, the more important each dollar becomes. So how can we be really strategic about creating an estate plan foundation that will maximize benefits for you now, provide a good foundation for the future, and something to build on as your net worth increases, as we hope and expect over the course of your life and career. So just to back out a little bit, what is an estate plan? An estate plan is essentially a collection of documents that take effect both during your life, like powers of attorney and irrevocable trust, and at your passing, so like a last will and testament. And I like to think of these as a kind of a personal business plan. They touch all aspects of your life, both while you're living and after you've passed away. There are a lot of documents that fall under this umbrella. As I mentioned, powers of attorney, which I'll talk about briefly in a moment, last wills and testament, which a lot of people have heard of, that scene in the movie where somebody passes away and everyone goes to the reading of the will and there's some, shocking denouement of a plot or something. That is part of an estate plan. That's usually not the way we want things to go. But a last will and testament does help dictate what happens to your assets after you pass away. So when we're talking about Allison and someone in this younger life stage and that net worth range of, $0 to $250,000, maybe on the negative side too, if she has some of that student loan debt that I mentioned earlier, we're really talking about what can we do for to get the most bang out of Allison's buck for estate planning. And the first that I personally think are the most important for those younger, kind of earlier junior clients are powers of attorney. And what these documents do is that they allow you to name someone to step into your shoes for different purposes. So a healthcare power of attorney, it's to allow someone to help you make medical decisions on your behalf if you find yourself to be incapacitated. So the good thing about a medical power of attorney is you're not necessarily naming someone to make decisions for you. You're, number one, expressing your wishes as to, you know, artificial hydration and nutrition. If there are cultural or religious concerns that you'd like to be factored into your medical care decision-making, you can express those in that medical power of attorney. You're also naming someone to carry out those wishes. So you're not burdening them with what decision do I make? You're saying, I trust you. I want you to help communicate these decisions to my care team. This is what I've already laid out. So this is really, really helpful in, you know, medical emergency situations. And I would argue that your health tends to be the most important part of your day-to-day life. So it's really important to create these documents before you find yourself in need of them. It's just like insurance. You hope you don't have to use them, but usually by the time you need them, it's too late to if there's a crisis going on. So that's kind of the deal on medical powers of attorney. Financial powers of attorney are similar in that you are naming someone to step into your shoes for financial decision-making purposes. So to act on your behalf if you need assistance with banking, finances, things like that. This is really, really helpful because if you find yourself in a position where you're either incapacitated, you know, medical emergency, or you're out of range, you don't have internet access and you can't do online banking, or you're out of the country and you can't sign a document that you need to sign, your financial power of attorney or attorney in fact that you name can do those things. And in Allison's case, it's really important because, you know, we know Allison has capacity, heaven forbid there's a medical event, but this is really about keeping Allison's accounts in good standing. So really in that wealth building phase, you know, trying to save as much as she can. And we don't want, you know, overdraft fees or late payment fees to eat into that. So we really want to preserve those accounts in good standing. And if you know, loan payments or car payments aren't on direct debit, we want someone to be able to make those payments if you're not in the position to do so yourself. So that's why those are really, really important. Those are the during life documents that can really help out in times of crisis or in a bind. Next, I actually wouldn't recommend a last will and testament as the most important dispositive mechanism for Allison. I think they're very important. I encourage all clients to get them. But at Allison's phase of life, she again is really building wealth. So she probably has, you know, some checking accounts, maybe a savings account, is really trying to pay down that debt or save, and likely has a very large retirement account proportional to her other assets. So beneficiary designations are the manner in which you tell your custodian of your retirement account what will happen to the assets after you pass away. So during your open enrollment, you go through, you do all your elections and you say, you know, for your insurance and for your retirement plans, okay, what will happen if I pass away? Who gets this? Who's the primary beneficiary? Who's the contingent beneficiary? And this is really important because if your retirement plan is your largest account, that essentially deals with most of your assets after your passing. The great news about the beneficiary designations is that they're free. You can access them at any time through usually an online portal, and you can make as many changes and include as many individuals as your custodian allows. So you don't need an attorney to do this. You don't have to pay anyone to do it. And you can do it at 2 a.m. You can do it twice a week. I don't necessarily recommend that. But if circumstances change, you can reflect that in real time. So that's really, really the meat and potatoes of Allison's kind of estate plan to-do list. Lastly, to the extent that we're getting into that upper band of net worth, we really want to be talking about last will and testament if there's, you know, a home that's recently purchased, if there are family heirlooms, if there are people that Allison would like to benefit other than her parents, because if she is unmarried and has no children, and doesn't have a will, her assets will pass back up to her parents, then out to siblings and down to nieces and nephews. So to the extent that there are family relationships or dynamics or economics that make that not make sense for Allison, that's when we'd want to start talking about a last will and testament. And I'll talk a little bit more about this and a revocable trust, which I know somebody asked about in the comments as well, on our next slide when we get to our next persona. But I will let Jess take us through the financial planning portion of our next.
Jess, before you take on the next persona, a couple of questions for you, Tara Lynn, before we move on. Can you address when you'll cover the advance directive, or should it happen at this life stage? And then there was an earlier question about who's the best person to designate, for your medical or financial POA. Is it a spouse, an adult child, a lawyer, a financial advisor? If you could cover who would be the best to assign a POA authority to, and the advance directive as well.
Yeah, those are great questions. I'll take the advance directive first because that's easier. When I say a medical power of attorney, I'm also referencing an advance directive. So I apologize for not making that clear. A lot of lawyers will collapse those into one document so that you only have to sign once. It'll give your wishes, and designate a power of attorney, an attorney in fact, and have those advance directive components as well. Some attorneys like to separate them, but they're usually part and parcel. So it's unlikely that you'd have a conversation with an attorney about a healthcare power of attorney and to not have an advance directive conversation as well and end up signing that. So those tend to go together because it's medical decision making, who you'd like to carry out those decisions and what decisions you'd like those to be. So they're often rolled into one for efficiency. When it comes to deciding who you would like to name for your attorneys, in fact, I would like to say that the way that I like to talk about it with clients is for your medical power of attorney, who understands the decisions that you would want to make. It's not who do you trust to make the decisions? It's who do you feel will convey your decisions to your care team the best? Because again, that person that you name isn't conveying what they want for your care. They're conveying what you want. So you want someone who can be in that position. Oftentimes that is a spouse, because a lot of people have that type of relationship with their spouse. I've had clients who are unmarried who've told me, I can't have it be my mom because I want X, Y, and Z. And I know that her relationship with me to me won't allow her to convey those decisions, or, vice versa. It has to be my mom because I know that she'll make the decision that I've requested or that I've laid out in the document. When it comes to the financial powers of attorney, those are different because they take effect usually upon the signing of the document. So if you don't want that person to have access to your financial accounts, they're not a good person to name as your attorney. In fact, most professionals, so like a lawyer, a financial advisor, for various liability and compliance reasons, won't be able to serve in that capacity, especially in their professional capacity. If you have a friend who's a lawyer, you're very close with them, you're not their client, and you'd like to name them and you have that conversation, that's a bit different. But usually it's family or close relations in terms of, friends, family, friends, things like that. As clients age, sometimes when they don't have closer family left, that's when they have professionals step in to serve in those capacities. So, a lawyer, but again, that's a little more rare. Additionally, when you ask someone to serve in that capacity, there's often a cost component. So that's why people pick friends and family as well. So for medical, it's who will, carry out your wishes to the letter of what you'd like, what you've designated. And for financial, it's who do you trust implicitly with access to your financial accounts? Because usually from the moment you sign, that power of attorney is effective. So often it's spouse or, adult child or parent, sibling, someone that you trust to the highest degree.
Thank you, Carolyn, and thanks everyone for such great questions. Keep them coming. All right, so next up we have Mary. Mary's in her 40s, she's mid-career, she's driving hard potentially for that next big promotion. She's happily divorced with 2 teenagers and really starting to take on the complexities with her father showing early signs of dementia. So as you can imagine, and share some empathy here, she has a lot of life events coming at her really quickly. So once you do graduate to this stage in your career, things do start to look a little different than they did a few years ago. Potentially you have a higher salary, so you might be asking yourself questions like, what am I supposed to be doing now that I have additional ability to save? Where's the best place to save? And maybe you're starting to solidify some short and long-term goals, potentially even starting to think about what retirement looks like for you. So before anything else, the first thing we're really going to focus on for someone like Mary is maximizing your 401k contribution. I've learned that there's some non-USers on the line too, so I apologize, but a 401k is just a US retirement plan that an employee and an employer can contribute to. So as I talked about on the last slide, at a minimum, you want to make sure you're taking advantage of that employer match. And now you might even find yourself having the flexibility to continue to save. And we absolutely want to start looking at maximizing your 401k contribution past just the match. And the reason for that is really the concept of time value of money. The sooner you get money into a 401k plan, the longer tax deferred growth you have before you start to actually draw from that account in the future. So looking past 401k contributions, say you're capturing the employer match, you're maxing out the $20,500 to your 401k plan, but you still have some excess savings. What do you do with it? So that's when we start thinking about things like opening a brokerage account. You want to avoid, to the extent possible, just building up cash in your checking, especially today where interest rates for banks are very low. So you'd want to open this brokerage account that maybe it's an individual, or if you're married, you can open a joint account. And you can start driving savings into those buckets and you're able to invest those dollars. It's really this idea of taking your excess paycheck money and setting it aside to start accumulating as additional dollars to use in retirement. If you do have excess, substantial excess cash flow, you might want to look into whether your employer allows you to defer compensation. I'll be honest, this is not very common for companies to allow people to defer compensation, but if they do allow it and the concept sounds familiar to you, it's really the idea of putting aside some of your salary today and driving it for future years. So if you make $400,000 as an income now, you can tell your employer you want $100,000 of that to pay out 10 years from now over the course of 5 years. The reason you would consider that is really to reduce your tax burden now, and drive that income event into future years where you're potentially not working anymore, so your tax rate is likely lower. As I mentioned, that's really not as common. What is more common is equity compensation at this point. And there's many different types of equity compensation, ranging from restricted stock units to employee stock purchase plan and incentive and non-qualified stock options. This conversation around equity compensation is a session in and of itself, but in summary, equity compensation is both a strong source of wealth creation and also brings with a really complex tax strategy. So this is where having that team of a financial advisor to help you drive some of the strategy, plus a tax preparer to make sure that the decisions you're making aren't kicking you into a really high tax rate, or if you do exercise some non-qualified options, you're preparing for the tax event that'll happen that following April. And it's really just making sure this team is working towards helping you make informed decisions. You'll see Manage 529 college savings next, and it's no surprise to anyone, tuition is extremely expensive. And we're not really anticipating that to go down anytime soon. Fingers crossed, we can hope. But the earlier you can get started on saving towards whatever that college savings goal is for you, the better it is ultimately. So maybe some of you aren't familiar with the concept of a 529 plan, but these are college savings plans that make it a lot easier and more efficient when it comes to saving for college. not every plan or every state offers a 529 plan, but you can go with any state that you want to choose, and you're not stuck with just the colleges or universities within that state. So just in other words, you could have a New York 529 plan and go to school in California and still use those assets. The reason they're state specific is because some states do offer a tax credit or tax deduction for making a contribution. So from earlier in the conversation where people were sharing where they're from, many of the states that you shared do offer state tax deductions. Washington state is a no income tax state, so there is no state tax deduction for Washington. But in the chance that you are in a state that offers a state tax deduction on 529 plans, you would ideally want to go with the plan for that state. Within the 529 plan, you're able to contribute dollars, and you're able to get access to usually great investment options that have strong track records, and that money has tax-free growth potential, which is even stronger than a 401k plan. Next up is insurance planning. So we talked about insurance planning in the prior scenario, but in this case, your net worth at this point is likely continuing to grow. So you want to make sure you're paying attention to those underlying policy limits. So maybe your life insurance needs to go up a little bit as your income increases and your family is potentially relying on you more. In Mary's case, she's divorced. I'm not sure if her ex-partner is contributing, but she likely is very adamant about making sure her kids are covered if something were to happen to her down the line. And primarily at this stage, you should look at revisiting your umbrella policy. So as we mentioned briefly in the prior slide, this umbrella policy is really think of it as a physical umbrella that you have over your other insurance policies. So once you've exhausted maybe your underlying limits on home or auto, this umbrella kicks in to provide an overarching protection. You want to make sure you're protecting all of the assets that you've worked really hard to build. An easy rule of thumb here is you want to have an umbrella policy more or less equivalent to your net worth. There's some nuance to that because your retirement plans in and of themselves have protections in place, but at least as you build up that brokerage account, you want to make sure your umbrella policy covers any assets that could be unjustly taken. And the last piece here is understanding how your family financial needs impact your plan. So in Mary's situation, she's falling into what we call that sandwich generation, which many of us can probably relate to. She's getting ready to send the kids off to school and she's about to become this empty nester. She might think, I'm free, I can do what I want now, and just then pivot and have to worry about or focus on what potential care is going to look like for her parents. As we mentioned earlier, her dad is showing early signs of dementia. So this is really where estate planning comes in, and revisiting the core documents you've set up and thinking about what else you might want to do a little differently.
Yes. So as Jess said, Mary has a lot going on, and this is going to be reflected in the recommendations for next steps on estate planning. And for efficiency, we're going to assume that Mary did everything that we recommended for Allison when she was in Allison's life stage. Now she's further along in her career. She's in a different place personally. She has dependents. She was married and is now divorced. So there are a lot of different factors at play. I'm going to take Mary's situation first, and then we can talk a little bit about the sandwich generation. But this is the classic case of put your own mask on before helping somebody else. For Mary, estate planning is going to be self-care. And I know that term gets thrown around a lot, but in this situation, I'm thinking of, okay, what is future Mary going to thank today Mary for? And it's getting an estate plan. Specifically those core estate planning documents. So a last will and testament, or a last will and testament and a revocable trust. Someone in the chat asked what the difference is. Great question. A last will and testament is a document that deals with the assets that you own at your passing and what will happen to them after you pass. So you sign it today while you're living, and it doesn't have an effect until you have passed away. So it's a post-life document, essentially. A revocable trust is a document that you sign today, and you can use it during your life. You can fund it, or you can transfer assets into the name of your revocable trust and hold it as essentially an extension of kind of yourself. It's like a wrapper. It doesn't have significant or substantive tax benefits. from an estate planning perspective. We can talk a little bit about advanced planning on the next slide with our next personas, but it essentially is a way for you to simplify your estate planning and asset management during your life so that you can streamline estate administration or probate after you pass away. So essentially, everything you own at your passing has to be probated in your individual name, and you have to go to a court and show the will, or your personal representative has to go to the court and show the will and get appointed to be in charge of all these assets, collect all the assets, and distribute them out to the appropriate beneficiaries that you've named in your will. Any assets that you own in a revocable trust are called non-probate assets, which means that because they're not in your individual name, they do not have to go through probate, which means that you don't have to file the will for the trustee to be able to distribute out those assets to the named beneficiaries. So the real benefit to having a revocable trust over a will is that it has the utility of being able to use during your lifetime and streamlines administration after your passing for your loved ones during a difficult time where sometimes administration is not the first, second, or third thing on your mind. It does usually incur a higher fee to set up, and there's more work on the front end of putting things in place, transferring assets into the trust. You can have a trust and not put any assets into it, and it kind of negates the utility there. But most attorneys who create revocable trusts for their clients would recommend that they have the trusts funded during their lives. For Mary, she could go either way, depending on her personal circumstances and preferences. Another note on wills versus trusts is that oftentimes it's jurisdictional. So I practice in Washington. We have a lot of clients who have regular wills here because probate is not difficult. I also practice in Massachusetts. All of my Massachusetts clients have revocable trusts because probate there is really, really clunky, takes a long time, and can be very expensive. I know in California, attorneys there like to push revocable trusts as well because probate is expensive and cumbersome. So again, a lot of this is going to depend on variables that we don't have the most time to get into here. But it's a good question to ask your attorney. Which do you think makes most sense for me? In your will, it's really important, especially when we're talking about for Mary, her minor dependents, her 2 teenagers, she can name guardians and should name guardians for her children in her will. The presumption is that if there's a living biological parent, they will become the guardian. So if Mary passes, her former spouse is still alive, the assumption is that the former spouse will be the first in line. If the former spouse has also passed, that's when the named guardians come into play. And this is really important because you want to feel confident that the people that you want to care for your children in the case of an emergency, if you're no longer with us, that is clearly expressed. Additionally, in a will and in a trust, you can provide financially for your children after your passing. So this is really, really helpful in tandem, the care and keeping of your children and also the financial support of your children. So you can also include a spouse there. If, Mary were to get remarried, she can include her new spouse in her plan as well. A note on property agreements. I'm going to assume that Mary had a prenuptial agreement. So one of the reasons she's happily divorced is that her divorce process was very easy. It was streamlined, and her former spouse are now happily co-parenting their 2 teenagers. But that's a big assumption. In a lot of cases, people don't think about property agreements like a prenuptial agreement, an agreement you enter into before you get married, or postnuptial agreement, which is the opposite, what you enter into after you get married. And these are really, really important from an estate planning perspective because you can only give away what you actually own. So in Washington and in California as well, it's a community property state. So there's a yours, mine, and ours approach to property. Each spouse has 100% interest in their own separate property, and then a 50% interest in the shared marital community property. Property agreements operate to alter the default in community property states, what I just explained, and setting expectations about how the relationship will go financially, setting up expectations, and also what will happen in the case of a dissolution of the marriage or in case of the death of a spouse. So if there's a shared home, how would equity be dealt with in the home? How would certain accounts and shared marital property be dealt with? That's what we're really talking about here. Additionally, you can have agreements for that are outside the marital realm. In Washington, it's called a cohabitation agreement for there's a statutory status called committed intimate relationship, which involves a variety of factors for non-married couples who meet the certain factors of this committed intimate relationship, and it accords property rights between the partners. And so a cohabitation agreement can function to alter those default rights in some way, or create different expectations about what would happen in the case of a dissolution of the relationship or a death of one of the partners. So I'd like to touch on that just so that people are aware, and it's always something to think about. And finally, just circling back to this sandwich generation conversation, Mary does have a lot going on. It's really important for her to understand that whether she likes it or not, she's probably going to interact with her parents' estate plan in some way. So it's important to get her parents' documents if they don't have them. It's important to talk to her children as they go off to college about getting powers of attorney in place, especially if they're going, in different states, getting those executed before they leave. And also just really understanding how her parents' plan is, or lack thereof, is going to affect her, whether it's she's getting a gift from them, there's something she's inheriting, whether it's she's named in their documents, and whether she has to clean up the mess of an estate plan that doesn't exist. So it's really important for Mary to know what's coming down the pike as it relates to her parents' plans. But I'll pause for questions here. It looks like there's some activity in the chat.
So Tara Lynn, the one question to address before we move on, and we've decided to just go a little bit longer with this presentation. So for those of you that are participating, keep the questions coming. We might go past the top of the hour a little bit. So the one question before we move on, Tara Lynn, can a stepmom or stepdad be a guardian if one of the biological parents is alive?
So that is a great question. That is going to depend. If it's a classic situation where both parents are alive, let's say both parents are remarried, and there's been no alteration of parental rights, there's been no adoption, or anything like that, the biological parent will be the guardian if the other biological parent passes away. In the case of both parents have passed, then the step parent can be the first name guardian. But that really depends on the nature of the parental rights between the two biological parents.
One other question. A plan you make in one state, is it valid or not valid if you move to another state?
Great question. So in the United States, if you validly execute estate planning documents or an estate planning document in one state, so you live in Washington, you execute properly a Washington will and powers of attorney, those are valid in all of the other states in the country. Until you change them. That being said, if you are on a sabbatical, you're in school, you're short term in a different place than where you actually reside, where you're domiciled, you don't need to get new documents. If you decide to move from Maine to California, you should get new documents for a variety of reasons, not just because laws are different in each state, but also because tax considerations are different. So some states have what is called an estate tax and some states don't. So you want to be sensitive to where you live and the law of the land. And so if you are actually relocating, you're moving, you're picking up and going to a new state, you should revisit your estate plan just to update for the new jurisdiction.
All right, thanks, Carolyn. So our last persona is Jane and Bob. And at their age, we're thinking about things like, can we retire? Are we going to run out of money? And how do you have that peace of mind in your plan? So first and foremost, we want to understand what your spend looks like, especially relative to your portfolio's ability to sustain that spend. So essentially, we want to make sure you're not in a situation where you're outliving your money. As we think about this, we want to think about recreating that paycheck. If you're spending $5,000 per month, can you sustain a $5,000 per month draw from your portfolio? Generally speaking, you need some help from an advisor to run that type of analysis, but there's also ways and calculators on Google that you can use to back into that as well. When you run those numbers, you have usually come to 2 points. One, you've hit that point of vocational freedom, that point where you don't have to work for money but can sustain your lifestyle on the savings you've accumulated to date. Or you hit that point where it says, you need to work another 2 or 3 years to actually get to that point of vocational freedom. So this is that point in time is really where people like Jane and Bob run into before they make the decision to officially retire. A key part of this is having the right mix of stocks and bonds, which is critical at this stage. I know we didn't touch too much on investment philosophy and being a wealth management firm, that's a key portion of our bread and butter, but throughout your life and your career, there's going to be a different mix of stocks and bonds that's going to be critical at various stages. For example, in your peak earnings years, you're going to want to have a more growth-oriented portfolio because you're able to sustain your life on your income and likely save some. As you head into retirement, you're in drawdown mode. So you likely are going to shift a little bit more conservative. One fib that I want to, or one myth I'd like to clarify is your mix of stocks and bonds has very little to do with your age and more to do with your nest egg and then your expenses. So I met with someone this morning who's 72 years old, and she's in our most growth-oriented portfolio because she saved a lot of money and she lives very, very much within her means. So it doesn't matter how old she is, we're not going to put her in a very bond-heavy portfolio. So you might think that all of this makes sense in theory, save in your working years and spend in your retirement years. But trust me when I say the mentality shift is extremely difficult for people once they actually hit this point in life. Switching from that save mode to spend mode is something that people have trouble doing because they've ingrained that practice of saving. It's almost hard to start to pull money or draw money down from your account. Next up is tax planning. So Bob and Jane are likely in the last couple of years of their high income years. So they want to consider things like super funding a charitable or donor advised fund for a strong tax advantage in their charitable in their high income years, assuming they have charitable giving goals. Or for example, if they want to downsize and secure a mortgage, this is something they'd want to look into while they're still able to show income flow. Underwriting is very difficult if you can't show that income. There are definitely lenders who do asset-based underwriting, but it's much simpler if you can show steady income streams. Jane and Bob will also likely shift from that high income tax bracket to something lower once they retire. So we want to think about things like Roth conversions in those lower income years, when to take Social Security, for example. Should they take it at 62 or should they take it at full retirement age, or should they wait till 70? And what really are those benefits? And the last piece is required minimum distributions. We talked about maxing out your 401k. Well, those 401k dollars, unfortunately, have rules around when you have to take the dollars out. So when you hit 72, you have to start taking minimum draws from those accounts, and that creates taxable income for those specific years. So from a tax planning perspective, you want to make sure you're withholding the right amount for federal and state income taxes. From an insurance perspective, it's really prudent, as always, to reevaluate your insurance policies. I like to tell people to let's look at these every 2 years. Doesn't mean we're necessarily making changes, but let's just make sure your nest egg, your goals, your life, all of that is still aligned with the liability limits you have in place in your policies. Maybe you reevaluate, do you still need that life insurance, or can you start to self-insure if one of you does prematurely pass? So make sure you're evaluating not only do you need more coverage, but do you still need to be paying the premiums on the coverage you have? The other piece here is long-term care. long-term care insurance is typically, I would say, the number one thing that my clients in their 60s bring up to me. And it's because it's very difficult to secure long-term care policies nowadays at reasonable premiums. When people see the premiums on these policies now, they're very high. So it's important that you have a plan for this. For many at this stage, they've established significant equity in their home, and that equity is really the backup plan to weather some sort of long-term care situation. Others who might be a little bit more risk averse might want to just pay for a long-term care policy, and that's important to explore at minimum. And the last piece is really how you want to incorporate your kids into the plan, if at all. Are you potentially going to run into state or federal estate tax issues? And does it make sense to start gifting some of your assets now to decrease your taxable estate, which I'm sure Tara can talk more about. So I'll stop here and pass it on over to the expert.
Thank you. We are going to finish out here with Jane and Bob. And I think there's joy in doing estate planning for every phase of life. But there's a special joy that comes with advising clients that are in this phase, because you've kind of been with them the whole way, and you've seen them do the workhorse core estate planning documents, and now they're usually at a point where they get to kind of pick up their head and look around them and say, oh, we're this far, we have great family, we have great friends, we love our community. How can we memorialize that? How can we incorporate that into our legacy, and support the people and the things that we care about with the assets or the discretionary assets that we have now that we feel taken care of and secure, really aligning, the passions and purpose that Jess mentioned earlier in the presentation. So I touched on the first bullet point in our last persona with Mary, but just to drive it home, making sure that the people who depend on you, whether it's your adult children or your aging parents, that they understand their plan. Again, usually you're probably going to be, Jane and Bob are probably going to interact with it in some way, whether it's, being the powers of attorney or attorney in facts for their parents, supporting parents, helping them with estate planning issues as they transition, into their elderly years. So it's really important to try and have these conversations when people are healthy, and when people have the mental capacity to execute documents. So to the extent that you can, do all this stuff before you need to, so that when you need it, it's already there and it's zipped up tight. For Jane and Bob themselves, this is really kind of the set it and forget it phase of estate planning, because they have all these they have their core plans from when they were in Mary's life stage. And it's really just taking those plans out every 3 to 5 years, or with the passing of a major life event. So a birth, a death, marriage, a dissolution of marriage, a huge job change, or a big move. These are the times that you want to take out your estate plan, review it, make sure that it still fits. And if it doesn't, kind of make those adjustments here and there. Additionally, as Jess mentioned, advanced estate planning starts to come into the forefront as we're having these legacy conversations. So assuming Jane and Bob feel comfortable with where they are in terms of vocational freedom, nest egg, retirement funds, and they want to start shifting assets to other people or organizations in their lives, this is where advanced estate planning comes into play. So when you are looking at a net worth of $1 million plus, we want to be sensitive to estate taxes. So in the US, there's a federal estate tax. So if you pass away with up to more than $11.7 million, you are subject to a 40% estate tax on that overage. So until you hit that, 11.7 and 1 penny, there's no estate tax obligation. Very high amount. That number does fluctuate depending on administrations. This most recent hike, it's historically high right now. The most recent hike to this $11.7 million exemption went into effect in 2017, and it's going to sunset January 1, 2026. So it's a moving target. So it's when you get into this higher net worth phase, it's important to contact your team and keep track of what's coming on the horizon. There's also a state estate tax in some states. So Massachusetts, it's $1 million exemption, very low. In Washington, it's $2.193 million. Again, lower than the federal estate tax. The rates are usually lower on the state level. Washington, it's 10 to 20% rate on that overage, depending on where you fall in the band. But again, it's important to keep track of these numbers. As just mentioned, you can decrease your taxable estate, which is essentially giving funds away, whether it's, giving funds to grandchildren, funding 529 plans for grandchildren or nieces and nephews or godchildren, supporting education, whether it's giving funds to children outright, establishing trusts for children, or whether it's creating a foundation, creating a donor advised fund, giving outright charitable contributions to causes or organizations that you support or you'd love to support. Those are all ways of decreasing your taxable estate. And again, here I'd like to kind of drive the point home that it's not the concept of like more money, more problems. It's okay, how can we strive to get the most simplicity and accomplish the goals that you want to accomplish? So with Jane and Bob, we're trying to identify their priorities and the legacy they'd like to leave, and coming up with the most efficient ways to do that. So again, just having them update their plans and thinking about the mark that they want to leave in the lives of their loved ones and in their community. So I'll pause here. Were there any questions that popped up, or can I give it over to Jess to finish us out?
Caroline, I think we're good on questions so far. If anyone has any additional, feel free to pop that right in the chat. But just to bring it back home to this triangle here, what is true financial well-being? Yes, having a plan is extremely important. It's that foundational layer of managing your money and achieving your goals. But equally important is thinking beyond that and hitting that stage of financial and personal fulfillment. As we know, money doesn't buy happiness, but knowing what your goals and your passions are and really spending time preparing to reach them does ultimately provide that.
Thank you, Jess. So I just, as we wrap up, I just want to share just quickly a couple of more key thoughts. Just given everything that we've discussed this afternoon, just remember, no matter what phase you're in life, we all should have a plan, and you should have a plan. I want to just touch on very briefly that at Brighton Jones, we're a financial well-being company that focuses on your complete balance sheet and managing that. To the left, this wheel represents our core services that we provide to all clients. To the right, we have a very extensive array of specialized services. Tara Lynn is in our estate planning affiliated law firm called 2030 Law. She's an example of those specialized services. We also have a division that works with those who have investable assets below $1 million, and that division is our open plan division. And you can see the rest of our specialized services to the right. We also have beyond the balance sheet programs, such as the one that I lead, Women Living a Richer Life. We hold financial education workshops under FinEd for students, high school and college. We have a foundation, etc. And then lastly, before we conclude, I invite each of you that would like to have a discussion about your financial planning needs to reach out and schedule a complimentary introductory call with our National Financial Wellbeing Manager, Heather Pearson. So you can reach out and reach Heather at hello@Brighton Jones, or take a picture of the QR code here attached. But we invite those of you that have the need and want some help to give us a call and have a conversation. Thank you for joining us again. I'll turn things back over to Joni or Monica.
Both Monica and I are so committed to having women be empowered financially, because it really does feel amazing to have all of your financial, all of your finances in order, I have to say. So thank you all so much for this amazing information. It will be available on our YouTube channel starting tomorrow, so you can watch it again. And please feel free to reach out to Brighton Jones.